Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette,
Discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever. We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette. Well met, listener, and welcome to episode 144 of Movie Oubliette, the bi-hemispherical podcast for forgotten fantastical films with me, Conrad, enjoying a sci-fi movie season in my local cinema in Cambridge, UK.
And me, Dan, just melting down here in Melbourne, Australia.
Oh. We focus on forgotten fantasy, sci-fi and horror films because we love public urination, love spuds, and monsters that suck all the meat off your bones, except your face. Hello, Dan.
The face is the worst part. I mean,
It is.
We all know that.
It's just gristle. Yeah.
Stubbly bits, teeth.
Yeah.
Who wants to eat teeth?
Yeah, noses. It's terrible.
So what movies have been playing at your local cinema?
Yeah, it's really weird. They've just decided to put on 2001.
Wow.
Interstellar. I didn't go and see 2001 because I'm just a bit over that one. But I did enjoy going to see Interstellar in the theatre because I didn't see it on the big screen at the time.
Ah, right.
And the sound design of that is just phenomenal. It's such an experience on the big screen.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
It does, yeah, especially during that famous spinning docking sequence, which got an applause in the theatre that I was in. Yeah, people love that sequence.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is my local Cineworld, they actually moved it from screen 3, which is kind of a small screen, to screen 1, because so many people wanted to see it. And meanwhile, Madame Web, the latest Spider-Man spin-off, was relegated to a smaller screen.
No. Yeah. Madame Web is not doing so well in the box office.
No, it's not. So, yeah. And so they're following up with Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, great.
I think that's it, yeah. So I'm looking forward to both of those.
Oh, they're all classics.
They are. Interestingly, they're also showing Monty Python and the Holy Grail
Are they?
for its 44.5th anniversary or something.
Oh,
it's
okay.
not really an anniversary, it's just something silly, which might be relevant for today.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe. So you're melting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just Australia. That's fine. Yeah, meanwhile, have our listeners been chatting to us?
They have, yes. So we have a new patron, Erin. Hello, Erin. Thanks for supporting the show.
Yes. Thanks for the support.
And we have people who are rediscovering old episodes. So we had a comment about Rogue, the crocodile
Aussie
movie.
Yeah, Aussie killer croc movie.
Yeah, and because of the director, Lisa MD23 said, I'd steered clear simply because I found Wolf Creek so disturbing, but I'm really glad you persuaded me to check this out. I have a real soft spot for creature features, and that usually means embracing a lot of cheesiness and bad acting, but this was refreshingly high quality on every count.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, I'm tempted to watch all 3, or maybe there are 4 Aussie killer croc movies just to compare them all. But I think they're mostly going to be bad. But I don't know. Maybe I'll be surprised.
Yeah, you never know. There might be some more gems hidden in there. Well, we didn't find a gem in Shakma, but people are still talking about it, mostly about the star of the show, Typhoon the Baboon, about whom John Michael Rouse said, he's cute in The Fly before he turned inside out.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah, not great.
Dustin Rathbun said, typically behind the door, so all those scenes where he's like bashing against the door all the time.
Yes.
Dustin says, behind the door was a female baboon, so Typhoon wasn't angry, he was excited. And if you happen to look closely, you can see just how excited he was as he was trying to get through that door.
Really? Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently, horny. There you go.
Yeah. I noticed when I was doing some socials for TikTok, there's a scene at the end where he, like, pees on the ground. You can see him peeing. And it's not very scary.
No. Again, peeing, that might come up in today's episode too.
Oh, yes.
Eddie Coulter said, Typhoon's in another movie called Order of the Black Eagle, where you not only see him wearing a tux and flying an ultralight plane, you also get to see him drive a baboon-sized tank and blow up a camp full of Nazis.
What? What is this movie?
I really do not know, but it sounds marvellous.
Yeah.
And we heard from Nick, who chose Shakma for us to do.
Oh, okay. Yes, interested to hear what he thinks.
So we were a little worried. Yeah, we were worried that we might upset him by throwing it back. But he said, I only actually first watched it a few years ago. My brother and I have this tradition of putting on a late-night trashy horror film on Christmas Eve after a few drinks, and he suggested Shakma after seeing the trailer online. I remember the beginning, a bit of the middle, and the ending. Perhaps the only bits of the movie you need to see?
Yeah.
And most likely nodded off during watching. You can't blame me for that.
Wow. Okay. So not a big fan then. Phew.
No, he just thought we'd have fun with it. And we certainly did. So thanks, Nick.
Yeah, we did. Yes, thanks, Nick.
And finally, we heard from Serge of Cold Crash Pictures. Hello, Serge.
Hello, Serge.
Shakma has a great premise. A killer baboon goes on a rampage during an after-hours college D&D game, but it can't go very far within its limited budget. A strong first act gives way to a soggy middle and boring finale. I wish I could go back in time and double the budget. Movie Oubliette reviewed this one this week, and frankly, their podcast has much better pacing.
Thanks, Serge.
Yes. So, yes, thank you everyone for getting in touch. We do love hearing from you.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So, Dan, what on earth could be popping out of the oubliette for us this time?
Yes, one moment, please. I'm in the Dark Ages.
Oh, no.
There's some sort of tournament going on.
Very loud.
Yeah, knights flying everywhere.
Oh, watch out.
A lot of blood. Okay, here's the movie.
Strapped to a turnip.
Yeah, I'll come back.
Oh, let's have a question guess.
I'm back.
Oh, thank goodness. So what do you have for us?
Yes, so today we are going to be discussing from 1977 the fantasy adventure comedy Jabberwocky. It's directed by Terry Gilliam, starring Michael Palin, Harry H. Corbett, John Lim. I can't even pronounce this. I don't know these actors because I'm not British. Mesurier.
It's a good try.
Warren Mitchell, Max Wall, Deborah Fallender, Annette Badland, and also a little cameo from Terry Gilliam himself.
Marvellous. So, what happens in this movie?
Yes, 'twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome rats outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son. And so, the scene is set. The Jabberwock monster terrorizes the land in the time of knights and jousting. But who will face the brutish beast? Dennis, a failed barrel maker, disowned by his father, travels to the castle to find a job with nothing but a potato. The king Bruno the Questionable declares a tournament to find a champion to slay the Jabberwock. Our Dennis, through a series of ludicrously unfortunate or fortunate events, ends up face to face with the creature. This movie has everything. Infidelity, gruesome violence, urinating, roasted rats on sticks. But will Dennis be able to slay the Jabberwock? Let's find out, shall we, Conrad, after the break?
Yes, and we'll be joined by a very fun guest.
Yes, someone versed in UK cinema and comedic actors.
The Jabberwock law.
People I don't know about because I'm not British.
Our special guest today stepped away from his career in post-production to conduct the most exhaustive and no doubt exhausting deep dive into a worldwide cesspit of woeful filmmaking to bring us the Bad Movie Bible, a hilarious, insightful and definitive compendium of the 101 or possibly 102 best worst films, as well as a glorious YouTube channel of the same name featuring wildly entertaining rundowns of knockoffs and cock-ups. It is, of course, author and film critic Rob Hill. Hello, sir.
Hey.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome. It's really exciting to talk to you. We were first introduced to your YouTube channel by one of our patrons, Boss Salvage, and just binged the whole thing. And then I was lucky enough to get your excellent book for Christmas from a friend and devoured that between Christmas and New Year. And what I particularly love about it is one of the most serious attempts to define that curious thing of what makes a good, bad movie, because it's quite a tenuous thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a broad subject, and I think the factors that make a good bad movie as opposed to a bad movie are hugely diverse. At the end of the day, there are movies we love to hate or love to hate, simply because they're cheesy or they're over the top or they're silly, and there are movies we love because they objectively fail in such a spectacular way. And that's not necessarily quite the same thing, but it sort of provokes the same response in us.
Yes. Dan, I think that will probably resonate with you because you've often said on this pod that you love watching crap.
Yeah, I don't know. I get a lot of enjoyment from terrible movies, and even if they are bad, and I realize they are bad, like it's still fun for some reason. I still find things that could be better, or like sort of pinpoint ways that they should have done this, they should have done that. It's fascinating. Like one tiny thing can make a okay movie really terrible, and it's just like a flip of a coin, really.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's often the result of sort of misplaced ambition as well, which can be the most entertaining kind of bad movie, I find.
Yes, as you say in your book, it has to be sincere. Somebody must be trying.
Exactly, yeah. Sharknado is fine in its own right, and movies like that, but yeah, they're not good bad, they're different.
Yes.
Yeah, and then there's Neil Breen and all of those other wonderful filmmakers, some of whom you even managed. I mean, you got Tommy Wiseau for an interview for your book, which I was very impressed with.
Yeah, that was a fun experience.
Yeah, anything about that you can share, or are you under an NDA?
No, he's exactly what he seems to be. He's just as deranged as you'd expect. Basically, he spent half the interview talking about his underwear, which he was trying to market to a broad audience. I don't know quite how that went. But...
Wow. Okay. But no Neil Breen, sadly.
Sadly not, no. I did contact Neil, and that ended up being a hilarious... I mean, to be honest, it was kind of better that he didn't speak to me, because his response was better than it could ever have been, in an interview.
Wow.
It's just this angry denial that he has anything to do with this bad movie community, and that actually his films are incredibly well received and well respected and well reviewed. And he said for weeks he was sending me little reviews that someone somewhere had written that was clearly ironic, but that he'd taken to heart as justification for his brilliance. What an experience dealing with him.
Oh, bless. It must be amazing to live inside that kind of bubble. I'm always full of self-loathing and doubt, but Neil Breen is not so encumbered, which is great.
No.
Well, the movie that you've chosen for us today, fortunately, is not the product of a deranged mind in that sense, although certainly a very original one. It's Jabberwocky. It's the first film directed by Terry Gilliam without Terry Jones. Can you kick us off by talking about your history with this film?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I grew up with it. It's probably one of the first sort of 3 or 4 videos I ever had back. Now I must have been 8 or 9 years old or something.
Wow.
And I think I'd been introduced to Monty Python through my dad or my cousin or something. And then Jabberwocky, I think it must have been on television, because I don't think it was like a retail video. I think it was recorded off the TV. And I got hold of it by swapping it with a friend of my parents' son's for The Yellow Submarine.
Oh.
I thought I'd much rather have Jabberwocky. It was a favourite when I was young. We studied the poem in school when I was 10. I don't know quite why we were studying Jabberwocky at the age of 10. And I took the opportunity to say, did you know there's a film, teacher? And she didn't. So she recommended I bring it in.
Oh, wow.
I did, and we got as far as the point where Warren Mitchell's shitting out of the window before she turned it off.
Oh, marvellous.
And sadly, the rest of the class never got to see it.
Oh.
But it never left me. I continued to learn, obviously saw more and more of Terry Gilliam's films, and he became one of my favourite filmmakers, probably my favourite living filmmaker. And I still think it's one of his best films. And I noticed, going back to it for this podcast, having a look on Rotten Tomatoes and so on, and it just isn't that well received. I don't think it's even got a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, if that means much.
No.
But I think it's a masterpiece.
Interesting, because Dan, you were saying it before we started recording, it clearly is a transitional work. Now, this is something you've been wanting to see for a while.
Yeah, well, I mean, Terry Gilliam is actually, he is one of my favorite directors of all time. Like, I grew up watching The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. That was my favorite film growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
And I still love it. And I almost don't want to cover it for the podcast, because it was a big flop, because I cherish it so much. I don't want to say anything bad about the movie. But yeah, I love Terry Gilliam. Like, The Fisher King, 12 Monkeys, Fear and Loathing. Like, he's just got so many great movies, and this movie does feel like a Monty Python movie to me.
Yeah, it kind of. But I think part of the reason for that, is it kind of highlights just how much the Holy Grail, for example, owes Gilliam, because a lot of it is, if you look back at the Monty Python's TV stuff, a lot of the connections that I've always made between Holy Grail and Jabberwocky aren't actually Python things, they're Terry Gilliam things.
Right.
And I think the Holy Grail and Life of Brian as well, even though I don't think he did so much work on that. There's something about the rhythm of them. There's something about the editing. There's something about the sound design and the texture of it all that is pure Terry Gilliam, not Monty Python. They have these crowds of people, and the sound is so layered that you kind of focus in and out of different things happening, and there's all this sort of background noise, but background textures, people, flies buzzing and people wailing and so on. That's not Monty Python, it's Terry Gilliam. But I do agree with you that it's a transitional film for him, though, still.
Yeah, because I read somewhere that he said that this was almost in response to Holy Grail, and he wanted to get away from the whole sketchy kind of structure of that movie. But it still feels very sketchy to me.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like a sketch after a sketch after a sketch with not much narrative tissue.
It does, yeah.
So I rewatched it for the first time in probably a couple of years recently, and that's one of the notes I made, was that it still feels kind of like sketches lumped together, but there is still a through narrative, and things are established early and paid off late, and it's not as sketchy as the Python films, but it is perhaps more sketchy than Gilliam would become. But I was listening to the commentary, which again I hadn't listened to since I bought the DVD 20-some years ago.
Wow, yeah.
And it's funny, Gilliam was saying, I'm so glad we got away from the sketch thing, and I'm so glad that it doesn't feel sketchy, and it doesn't. And it kind of still does, really.
Yeah, it does. And the Criterion edition, which has, I don't know if it's the same commentary, it has Michael Palin on there as well.
Yes, yeah.
Michael's talking about, it's a bit too Python-y. There are sort of Python gags in here, and I'd much rather we played it straight. Because visually, I think it does. I mean, in terms of the production value and the cinematography of it and the grittiness of it, certainly, it feels much more of a piece, and it feels much more Terry Gilliam than perhaps the co-directed Holy Grail was. It feels like it's actually trying to create a cohesive world that our main character Dennis is just bumbling through sort of from one sketch to another.
Yeah, I mean, the setting, the castles, the costumes, like it's pretty, it's impressive.
It's stunning to look at, I think, and especially when you consider they had no budget for it. The environment that Gilliam creates in that film is second to none. You don't get a richer and more textured and more sort of viscerally real environment in any other kind of movie. I don't think that it's a Gilliam thing, isn't it? I mean, all his movies have it to one extent or another. The main note I came away with after, again, going back to it after a couple of years, is it's just so dirty. Everything is
filthy.
So dirty and so broken and so old. And that's the costumes, the sets, absolutely everything. It's just fabulous in that respect.
Yeah, it's so much so that I think this is the reason for the lack of a fresh rating, because I'm not sure that critics have revisited it significantly since it came out, but certainly when it came out, it was marketed in the US as a Monty Python film, even though they did not want it to be. So people went in expecting Holy Grail. What they got was not Monty Python all the way through. It certainly isn't consistently funny in the same way. And also, it's dirty, it's grimy. And there were lots of reviews at the time saying, how dare you force us to sit through 100 minutes of such ugly people covered in filth.
Yeah, all these bad teeth.
Well, we can't help that. We're British. But 1977, it was not the era of gritty filmmaking necessarily, in the mainstream at least.
No, that's right. Yeah. And as you say, it was marketed as a Monty Python film, and I think we know there's no better way to curse a movie's box office than to market it as something that it isn't. And if you read the critics at the time, especially, I think Gilliam mentions this actually, particularly in the countries where Python were popular already, the reviews are, this isn't as funny as Python, and it's not trying to be. It's not meant to be gag a moment, gag a second. It's meant to be a bit more than that.
Yeah. Yet it kind of does feel a little bit gag a second. Like every scene is just utter chaos.
Yeah.
It's complete absurdity.
Yeah.
Either just strange things happens, or I don't know what's actually happening. Like people are talking over each other. It's just it's chaotic.
It is. That's another word I wrote down. Actually, I think that's Gilliam trying to muster a sense of the horror of the fact that nothing is controllable. Everything seems slightly out of control in this world. Everyone is just on the brink of starvation or murder or some other form of death, and it's just they're all sort of exist, particularly Dennis, in this kind of swirling mayhem of misery and horror and bleakness. Being British, I think that's just great.
Sure.
What's enjoyable is seeing, again, a typical Monty Python approach is taking a modern sensibility and modern sociological concerns and then just dumping them into the Dark Ages.
Exactly.
So you've got Dennis, who's not interested in becoming a craftsman as a cooper like his father. He's just interested in efficiency and making an efficient business that he can profit from. And his Disney I Want song would just be about traveling 2 miles and marrying the girl that's in his own village.
Yeah,
He's the most mundane little man that you could ever imagine. And he's our central hero, brilliantly played by Michael Palin, it has to be said.
It's just a delight watching him, isn't it? I've got a theory with Monty Python that there's two stages of love for Monty Python. It's the first one where you think John Cleese is the best one. Then you mature a bit and you realise actually Michael Palin is everything. It's all about Michael Palin. It's certainly his acting. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, so Dennis is kind of our accidental hero. Like he's not even trying to be heroic or courageous or anything. He's got very low ambitions. He doesn't want to get with the princess. He doesn't want to slay the big monster, but he does somehow.
All he wants is Griselda. Well, his ambitions are it's all established brilliantly in the opening scenes, I think, with Warren Mitchell, who's a British character actor, who'd be very familiar to British listeners, who is the local successful businessman, in a very suburban way. And there's a brilliant exchange that sums up everything at the beginning where Warren Mitchell's trying to show off. He's called Mr. Fishfinger. He's trying to show off because he's been over to Motley, which must be all of 2 miles away. And Dennis's reaction of wonder to this jet-setting sort of international figure that he's 2 miles away, and that's the world that Dennis lives in, and that establishes him perfectly. His ambitions are unbelievably small.
They are. And the film itself is a really fascinating example of a fairy tale being deconstructed, because you just have the princess who's completely bought into this narrative. She is convinced she's going to be rescued from a tower at some point and marry a prince and live happily ever after, and is wonderfully naive in her own way. And Dennis, who's just bumbling through life from one thing to another with no ambition, who ends up accidentally slaying the Jabberwocky, or the Jabberwock, I think actually is what it should be called, and being forced to marry the princess and given half the kingdom, and he's gutted, absolutely gutted.
Yeah.
all he wants is his beloved Griselda.
Yes.
Who's absolutely fantastically played. I think there's a point in Terry Gilliam's commentary when he's talking about her at the end, when she comes back into it at the end, and there's a shot which she's not center of. It's her dad, Mr. Fishfinger, who's doing the talking. She's just stood next to him, trying to make herself appealing to a knight. And what she's doing is grade A. It's extraordinary acting. Her face isn't still for a moment. Every feature is darting about her face, desperately trying to figure out the best way to impress. And she's sort of wiping mud off and doing her hair and everything. It's such a great performance. I've got it in my notes here. I have to remember her name.
Oh, Annette Badland.
That's it. That's it. She's just fantastic. It's her first film, apparently.
Oh, wow.
Which is not true of many of the rest of the cast, because you've pretty much got, I mean, it may be completely baffling for an international audience, but you've pretty much got a who's who of 70s British comedy going on here, because, I mean, not least, of course, you've got a couple of the Pythons, Palin and Jones. You've also got John Le Mesurier from Dad's Army. You've got Warren Mitchell from Till Death Do Us Part and In Sickness and in Health. Harry H. Corbett from Steptoe and Son. You've got Bernard Bresslaw from the Carry On movies, who we've bumped into in this podcast as the Cyclops in Krull. And even from the history of music hall, you've got Max Wall as King Bruno the Questionable. For a British audience, this is just like, who isn't in this movie?
Yeah.
This is really amazing.
And we're probably also you rightly say that a lot of these names won't be familiar to an international audience, but it's getting to the point where they wouldn't be familiar to a British audience, I think, as well, certainly below a certain age.
Yeah.
Because they're almost all forgotten, or, overly forgotten, if that makes sense. I mean, Max Wall was forgotten even at the time. He'd been, his career was all but over, I believe, and he'd been a huge musical star, between the wars. And as you say, playing Bruno the Questionable here, who is, I think, probably my favourite character. Certainly my favourite dynamic is the one between he and John Le Mesurier, who plays his kind of Chamberlain. The old married couple dynamic that they have going is just fab. And it's kind of almost a riff on Dad's Army as well, because Le Mesurier is naturally playing a very similar character to his Sergeant Wilson in Dad's Army, and He's just sort of second in command, but doesn't seem to have an awful lot of respect for the superior he's meant to be in awe of. And it just goes to show how brilliantly character actors could back in the day, and maybe still now, do a certain thing, just do one thing absolutely brilliantly.
Yeah, I love his character name as well, Passelhue.
Yeah. There's also, which I'd completely forgotten actually, Dave Prowse, Darth Vader.
Yes.
Is plays both of the knights. The Black Knight is the obvious, the red herring, which I hadn't realised was what the other knight's called.
Oh,
Yes.
with the fish.
The knight who is set up to be the hero. I always just thought he's got a fish on his helmet, and that's kind of funny. It never occurred to me that it's a red herring, and he's set up to be the hero, but then isn't. So he's literally called the red herring. That character.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, Palin doesn't know that until Gilliam mentions it on the commentary,
Yes, yeah.
which is like 20
wow.
years later.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned that David Prowse is in this, Darth Vader, the same year. I'm not sure if they shot this before they shot Star Wars or if it was concurrent, but he was certainly in both. And we also have Kenneth Colley, who plays one of the religious fanatics, and he was Admiral Piet in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, one of the few senior members of the Empire that didn't get throttled to death. And he's hilarious as the religious fanatic
He's so funny, isn't he?
who's absolutely determined to be flagellated.
Yeah.
He insists on setting himself on fire and catapulting himself out of the castle.
Yes. And so was the stunt man, apparently.
Yes.
Gilliam mentions this on the commentary. The stuntman was determined to be fired over the walls of the castle on fire.
Really?
And they said, no, we really must test this with a dummy. So they tried. And of course, it splattered straight into the wall.
Oh, my God.
So they said, no, you're not doing this. We're just going to do a dummy. It's going to look stupid. It's fine.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Oh, my God. I kind of wanted to just cover a few of the ridiculous scenes.
Okay.
There's just so many things that just kind of happen to Dennis.
Yeah.
He gets into the castle by just sneaking in the side door because one of the guards is taking a shit. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
And then he during the tournament he follows a turnip that falls on the ground and it just keeps rolling into an armory guy, and then he gets led off to the armory to help with them. But then he causes just havoc.
Yeah.
And everything just like collapses. Just so many of these kind of like, what is going on scenes that kind of just lead him in places that he just seems to be okay in, like the trebuchet catapult scene as well. Just like, what is this?
There's almost kind of an abstract element to it, isn't there? Yeah. We follow him for a spell anyway. We just follow Dennis through these increasingly awful experiences that he's being subject to that he doesn't really deserve and that he can't do anything about because he's so ineffectual.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favourite scenes, actually, that in the workshop where they've hoisted the knights up like cars and everything just turns completely to shit, purely and simply because Dennis comes in with a bright idea. And it's just marvellous. And it again, perfectly sums up that the kind of the modern issues transposed to back to medieval times scenario that Gilliam's going with. You know, Dennis just can't help but try to improve the environment, try to update the working practices and so on, and it leads to complete mayhem.
Yeah, he's trying to do a time and motion study, isn't he, in the armory, and causes complete pandemonium. Yeah, that's another one where we've got another great British actor turning up, Brian Glover as the armourer.
Yeah,
who I think most people will recognise from the pub in An American Werewolf in London and maybe Alien 3 as well.
Yeah, and Porridge if you're British.
I would say as a non-Brit, and also I didn't really grow up with Monty Python. I did watch Monty Python later on in my 20s. I've watched Holy Grail, Meaning of Life, and Life of Brian, and a few of the series, not a huge amount. So for me, this movie does seem quite foreign. Like I feel like there are lots of jokes I just didn't get, and I know I'm missing something. And even actor-wise, I mean, apart from Michael Palin and Terry Gilliam's like little cameo, like I don't really know anyone. No.
Yeah, it's looking at it, they are all incredibly domestic. I mean, John Bird, who plays the herald, who's constantly getting trumpeted over. He's another legendary British actor, but in a very narrow sphere. Even in this country.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because I feel like I'm that critic from the 70s that thought they were going to see a Monty Python. I was expecting John Cleese to pop up, or all of them, but just wasn't quite that. And all the actors that were in this movie, I didn't know who they were. So
Gilliam kind of made a rod for his own back with this, because he desperately wanted to break away from Python, and that's why he didn't put all the Pythons in it. But at the same time, he stayed with material that was incredibly Python-esque. And, in an era that they'd already done. I mean, we mentioned earlier about how there's perhaps at times it gets a bit too Python, considering it has a much straighter tone generally. And the hide and seek competition to choose the winner of the, rather than jousting, the king has the knights do hide and seek. And that is a scene straight out of the Holy Grail. It looks like it sounds like it works like it. And if you don't want to be associated with Python, don't do stuff like that, maybe.
Yeah. I did find like the humor with the sort of the potty humor where, the character with his ass sticking out the window taking a shit while having a conversation with Dennis. Or the scene where Dennis wakes up and the guards are urinating off the wall on his face. It's just like, this is classic Python, right?
Yeah. He gets peed on at least twice in the film, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. Griselda's younger brother, I think it is. Is it Roger?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, we get full frontal child penis within the first few minutes of this movie. It's no wonder that the Americans were just completely baffled and outraged.
Well, yeah, because we also get in the first moments unbelievable levels of gore, frankly.
Yeah.
The opening, I think it's the first scene, which is it's Terry Jones's cameo, in which he's killed by the Jabberwock, is with the shot of him still alive, looking down at his body. It's much like the ending of Meaning of Life when his Mr. Creosote character gets blown apart.
Yes.
He's actually pulling the same kind of expression as he looks down at his body with guts and blood hanging off it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's proper horror movie stuff.
It did remind me of like Sam Raimi almost, when he's kind of getting lifted up into the air. It's just like, wow, this is like visceral almost.
I was thinking that, but I don't remember this being so Sam, but of course, pre-Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
And interestingly, Gilliam credits Jaws with that. I don't quite see. I mean, the editing you see, cutting away to the view of the first person view of the Jabberwock is where you get that from Jaws, maybe. But yeah, it is incredibly Sam Raimi, the kind of visceral, kinetic mayhem of the camera work.
Yeah,
this
sure.
has much more, and I think Gilliam mentions this on the commentary, it has much more of a cartoonist's sensibility too, because a lot of the stunts where people and knights are being thrown sideways across rooms or splatting on walls and then slowly sliding down, it's very much like a live action cartoon, which is not something that Python did particularly.
That's very true. Yeah, there's a lot of every time a knight is struck violently, he doesn't just fall off his horse or fall down. We cut to what is obviously a suit of armor that's been dropped from a tall building. And it's like, no matter what the action is, it results in the knight being hurled hundreds of feet.
Yes, horizontally as well.
Yeah, I love the visual style of it, which is not something that Gilliam did again particularly, I don't think.
No, he's obviously always been a very visual director, but it's so obviously inspired by medieval art, but not just medieval art, but art in general. There's, there's a lot of Bruegel in there. There's a lot of Caravaggio in the way that the mise-en-scene works with characters, or maybe the blocking. There's lots of sort of staged shots of one character kind of leaning into another character and a character gesticulating, and the camera doesn't move, the characters fill the frame, and it looks just like a Caravaggio painting. It was quite beautiful.
Yeah, with the lighting as well.
Yeah. What I loved about that is how they use darkness for walls in some sets because they didn't actually have any. So it's just candles and letting things fall away into blackness.
Right.
And the cinematographer is Terry Bedford,
Right.
who also did Holy Grail. But I mean, this is something else, I think, in terms of, I mean, visually, it really is beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful shit, but it's beautiful.
And it's something that apparently there was a lot of feuding over because the cinematographer didn't think they should be doing this. He seemed to think that there was lots of money and wasn't happy to be having to make these compromises. But it does work because it just adds to it's a very dingy film anyway. It's a very dingy look. Obviously, it's shot in natural light as much as possible, and that's natural light in Wales, which isn't going to be the most determined of natural lights.
No.
Apparently, they regularly had huge arguments about what they were doing and whether or not it could be done better. And Gilliam just had to keep saying, we haven't got the money.
Right, yeah.
So this was made for about £500,000
Wow.
pounds, I should say. And according to one book, the film distributors' receipts were sort of about £479,000. So they almost sort of got their money back, but not really. So it was a flop.
Yeah, someone took a dive on that. But at the same time, though, it's been on home video for 40 years now. And I mean, I've bought it on at least 3 formats. There must be other people who have. I get the feeling that it's done, it's been a bit of a cult hit on home video, maybe, but I could be wrong about that.
No, I certainly think it found its life in that format in the 80s. For sure.
Now it's time for random trivia.
Okay, it's trivia time. Conrad, what did you find with a bunch of rats on sticks today?
So Harry H. Corbett, who plays the squire who cuckolds Bernard Breslaw's landlord, he apparently, when the hair and makeup lady visited him to talk about his look for the film, she was talking about either cutting his actual hair if he grew it a bit longer or maybe making a wig for him. And whilst she's having the discussion with him, she suddenly realises that Mr. Corbett is wearing a wig and is not acknowledging that fact. Which was awkward.
Yeah.
So he said, well, yeah, we could do it with my real hair, but I think you should make a wig just in case. So she went to the famous wig makers in London that does wigs for all the movies and theatre productions and said, I've got a bit of a sticky situation here. He's sort of treating it as though he doesn't have a wig. And they said, no, it's fine. Corbett does this all the time. We just make a wig topper that can go over his wig.
What?
So he is wearing 2 wigs throughout the movie. Which I think is just lovely as
my
another
God.
example of Neil Breen-like self-delusion.
Jeez. That's amazing.
Bless him. And that's our trivia.
So the Jabberwock creature, it's not a dragon.
No.
It's a bird?
Yeah, funny enough, so I watched it with my 10-year-old son, and at the end he said, why doesn't it just breathe fire? And I said, it can't, it's not a dragon.
Yeah.
And he said, then why is everything on fire then? Yeah, that's just Terry Gilliam. It's just, there's going to be smoke everywhere. There's going to be patches that are on fire for no particular reason.
Yeah.
And of course, you don't see the Jabberwock until the very end of the movie. But I
Yes.
do love its reveal, which is entirely through the point of view of Dennis in one of these helmets with just the slit for the eyes.
That's right.
But it's a fantastic bit of costuming and creature design as well.
It is, isn't it? And it's based very closely on an original illustration from Alice Through the Looking Glass, I think was the book that it appeared in, wasn't it? And like the main artwork as well. The main artwork, the poster artwork, is lifted straight from the book.
Yeah.
It's very faithful.
It is, yeah, John Tenniel. And the way that they achieved it, I think the stunt guy is standing in it backwards. So the legs fold in the right way, like chicken legs.
Yeah.
Because his knees are obviously going the other way and his arms are out at the back, sort of flapping the wings around.
Right.
It just tricks the human eye because you're just not expecting to see a body in that configuration. So it just completely fools you. And they also did the 70s thing that they did in Alien as well, where they have a duplicate knight's costume for a child. And it's a child that's doing battle with this thing. All the way through.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's obviously shot in such a way to create an impression of scale that it probably didn't have.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure about that last scene as well. Like, so there's a kind of a showdown between the Black Knight and Dennis. Why?
I don't know.
It's not very clearly established, but the Black Knight, I think, is dispatched by the guild leaders because they don't want the Jabberwock killed by Red Herring, who's meant to be... Red Herring and Dennis go out together. Dennis has become Red Herring's squire. They go out together to kill the Jabberwock. The Black Knight then attacks Red Herring because the guild have sent him to do that.
Right.
So once Red Herring's dead... I suppose Dennis has to go too. He's part of the same team.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, all right.
But it isn't very clearly established at all.
not.
It's one of the few plot points that doesn't really come through that the guild have done that.
Because there's also a whole bunch of these kind of menacing guys just kind of surrounding Dennis as well.
Yes. Again, it's just a Terry Gilliam movie. You're not going to find a quarry in a Terry Gilliam movie that isn't full of filthy, animalistic people scurrying about in the mud and scraping things to eat off the ground and so on.
One thing that is very Terry Gilliam, certainly at this point in his career, around the time of Brazil particularly, is there's a bit of socio-economic satire going on. For example, the monarchy is shown as something that is literally crumbling, which is quite enjoyable just as a visual gag. But, discussions in the Great Hall are interrupted by debris falling from the ceiling.
Yeah.
At one point, King Bruno offers his princess daughter the West Tower, and it promptly falls apart outside the window as he gestures towards it. And when her prince does finally come to rescue her while she's busy having a discussion with Dennis, unfortunately, the stone that he's holding onto in the windowsill just breaks and falls away, so he's toast. So, I quite enjoyed seeing this sort of scabby, falling apart vision of leadership.
Yeah.
And at the same time, also this underlying discussion about, well, we've got to keep this whole politics of fear, monster in the woods thing going, because it's actually pretty good for business.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic because, as you say, you've got the monarchy is literally crumbling, and it is fabulous. I mean, Bruno's sitting there eating meals, and huge waves of dust and masonry will just sort of collapse onto the table next to him. He doesn't even blink. He doesn't even acknowledge it most of the time.
Yeah.
You'd expect it then to maybe have kind of quite socialist politics, but actually it's kind of quite critical of the idea of unions or guilds as it would have been then. And the way that the business leaders control the situation, as you say, and exploit it is incredibly, again, modern politics and modern concerns transposed onto medieval times and medieval characters.
Yeah.
But it makes them out to be just like today's, not entirely likable business leaders. It probably maybe summed up in the scene where they race through the town because being a wealthy man of the time, you would apparently be carried by four men on a chair, basically, as like kings in cartoons are. And there's a scene where these three guild leaders are moving towards the center of the city in these contraptions being carried, and they're talking to each other as they do it, and they start whipping the carriers to get them just a few inches ahead of their competitor, guild leader or whoever he is, and it gets to the point where they're just running full pelt and people are falling off and it gets completely out of hand. But that's satire, taken to the extreme.
Yeah.
It is wonderful. And I note that Terry Gilliam majored in political science, I think. So I'm not surprised to see this sort of seeping into his narrative.
Yeah, so I don't I don't know a lot about Terry Gilliam, his sort of career. I didn't even know he was American.
Wow.
Until I listened to part of the commentary. Being one of my favorite directors, I did not know that. And so he was American, and he joined the Pythons fairly he was a latecomer to the group, I guess.
I think he was with them from the start, but
Oh, was he?
kind of worked separately. Well,
right.
they all kind of worked separately, strangely. They wrote in little groups, basically,
Sure.
amongst themselves, and then met to compare ideas. And Gilliam's role within that context was to come up with animated links between the sketches and so on. That was basically his job. So he was a full-blown member of the Pythons, but his role was very different to the others.
Right. Because I didn't even know he was an animator. Because there were sort of sketches that he'd done for this film that were realized.
Yeah, I believe that he storyboarded everything. Yeah, but also some of his I noticed there's actually some of his animation in it at the end. There's a cloud shot at the end, which is I'd never really noticed before, but it's clearly his style.
Yeah, the riding off into the sunset with the miserable happy ending.
Yes.
Coming to you live from the Movie Oubliette Theatre, it's the prestigious Mobley Awards.
Hello, it's that special time of the pod, the Mobley Awards, where we nominate our favourite raw potato tasty parts of the film in a number of accidentally monster-slaying categories.
Best quote.
As it is, I don't really have a favourite quote as such, but I love everything to do with the potato. Everything surrounding the potato. The scene where Dennis gets it, but also the scene where he's trying to get into the castle to begin with. And you're not allowed into the castle grounds unless you've got property, unless you've got something. And Dennis doesn't have anything, but then the guards realise he's got a mouldy potato, and that makes him rich in their eyes.
Yeah.
And that whole exchange where the guards are in awe at what you can do with a potato, you could live off that for a week, all that stuff. That's one of my favourite dialogue scenes, let's say. That's I love all the potato stuff.
Yeah. That scene was so strange to me because it keeps continuing. Like, Dennis goes away, but then like, oh, wait, show us your legs. And then he just slowly drops his
In fact,
trousers.
that's my favourite quote. That's my favourite. Show us your legs. I think that's probably that's the pinnacle of that scene. That's the absolute... And then the reaction is just something like, nah.
Yeah.
What were you looking for in these legs exactly that would have made a difference to your response?
I don't know.
I've no idea. My favourite comes from, I mentioned Kenneth Colley, who of course plays Admiral Peart in the Star Wars movies. I do love the scene where he is screaming about the fact that all of the punishments that they were going to visit upon Dennis for being a heathen, they get a bit jealous because they're flagellants and they want to visit all of this punishment on themselves. Yes. So he says, I want to trace across the firmament a glowing ball of flame, a testament to our godliness and piety. And somebody else says, what does that mean? And he says, I don't know, but I want it.
Best hair or costume?
It's a tough call, isn't it? Because, I mean, as you've revealed, there's a hell of a story behind one of the hairstyles in this movie.
Yeah.
So that aside, it's Dennis, isn't it? His fantastic bowl cut. That I think was it Terry Gilliam's wife gave him, I want to say, or
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, it is.
it's just fantastic. It's exactly what it should be.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. It's so unglamorous and done to his own hair. So quite brave of him, I think. For me, I absolutely adored all of the knights. We've mentioned the Knight of the Red Herring.
Yes.
But my particular favourite is the one that appears to have like a stuffed toy of a dog sort of emerging from the top of his helmet.
Yeah, it looks like a sort of a plushy dog-haired orange with flappy ears as well. So
Yeah. It's just hilarious.
Most 70s moment.
That's a tough call, isn't it? Because it's made by people who weren't really a part of the 70s, even in the 70s, and it's set in medieval times.
Yeah.
And so on. Nothing stands out to me. I suppose maybe the 1970s van that appears in one of the shots towards the end when the Black Knight falls off his horse.
Really?
You literally see half of the makeup van in the shot. And I suppose that's the most
way.
1970s thing in the movie.
That's amazing.
Yeah, But I think Gilliam mentions this, and he says that you don't notice. Oddly enough, you don't notice.
I didn't notice it.
It's a very fast
Yeah.
shot. It's about 12 frames long, that shot, and the van is the same colour as much of the background anyway, so it doesn't stand out, but it is really there when you notice it. It's really quite prominent when you see it.
Right.
Yeah. I thought the most 70s thing about this was the needless female full frontal nudity.
I did think about that, actually, yes.
Poor Deborah Fallender as the princess, an American, so she's shipped over to merry old England and then forced to do that.
It's the same as the full frontal in Life of Brian. It's not exploitative in and of itself, and it does serve the joke. It is funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still pretty 70s.
Favorite scene?
I'm not sure I have a particularly favourite scene. I do have a favourite shot, however, and it's during the jousting, and there is just this glorious slow motion shot of just bits of night flying through the scene with a spray of blood, and King Bruno in the background just looking utterly delighted with the goings on. He's just clearly enjoying the fact that despite all of his advisors' advice that this is wasteful, that they're just killing vast swathes of knights that they don't have many of and there's no point to it, but he just loves this as a form of entertainment, thinks it's great.
Yes.
He's got such a fantastic demented grin that he keeps doing at Maxwell in that scene as he's getting more and more covered in blood.
Yes, and nobody mentions it. Just you keep cutting back to them. It's just more and more blood on them, and nobody's mentioning it. They're sitting in the royal box, soaked by the end of it.
Yeah, it's very graphic. Like, it's a lot of blood, but it almost looks like a painting by the end of it. Like, it's quite striking.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's grotesque and humorous, but also beautiful. I don't know.
It's Caravaggio by way of Bosch, basically, which is kind of the look of the whole film.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Most cliche moment.
In terms of movie cliches, I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's that guilty. But in terms of Terry Gilliam cliches and Monty Python cliches, up to a point, just the dirt and the horror and the griminess and I suppose that's a cliche for these guys, really. But it's also one of the most appealing things about it for me. The general, just the atmosphere of filth and horror and misery. And I love the way, and Gilliam's great at this in all of his films, and it is a Terry Gilliam cliche, I suppose. The way he layers the sound in the background so that they're often just characters you don't know and you've never met, but you can just hear someone wailing in misery, just somewhere distant in the background. And you can hear the flies buzzing around the corpses, and that's a cliche, I guess, for Gilliam, and it's one that I love, and it really works.
Yeah.
I was going to go with The Accidental Hero, which particularly in comedies, of course. So, I mean, I kept being reminded of Army of Darkness while I was watching it, although, of course, that's Sam Raimi and much later, so that's interesting. But also The Wizard of Oz. So Dorothy shows up and kills one witch and then accidentally kills another one later on. So, yeah, I feel like The Accidental Hero is quite a good...
Yeah, it is. It's a hero's journey movie, isn't it, as well? I'd never thought about this before.
Yeah.
But it is essentially the monomyth.
It really is, although it doesn't have what you would call a traditional character arc, because, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Dennis learns anything during the course of this movie.
Yeah.
Best special effect.
If it counts, it has to be the Jabberwock itself, which is, I think it's just fabulous. It's again, I was watching it with my son, and he kept saying, "Do you actually see the monster? Are we ever actually going to see the monster?" And I was kind of thinking, we will, but don't get too excited, because you're used to Marvel movies and so on.
Yeah.
But it ended up being a lot more convincing and used a lot more as well in that final scene than I remembered for some reason. And it's just such a great design, as we've said, based on the original illustration. The whole thing's decomposing like everything else in this world. It's old and broken and falling apart, and presumably used to be able to fly, which it doesn't really do. It kind of flaps about some trees and stuff, I think, but it does, I don't think it can actually fly anymore, and just part of this world.
Definitely, yeah. My favourite was, we've mentioned it before, the Jabberwock's victims' bodies. Just these juicy skeletons seemingly stripped of everything other than the heads, which are pristine and left to sort of look at their terrible state that they're in horror, which is strangely more horrifying. In fact, the American censor was determined to cut those shots out because they found that particularly disturbing. They said, yeah, the skeleton's fine, but the head looking down is just really disturbing.
Yeah.
Can you cut before you get to that?
Yeah.
Favorite sound effect.
I've mentioned the flies and just the general sort of background horror texture and so on, but it is the sound of a knight being hurled to the ground. Gilliam manages to get, or the sound designer manages to get, so much dense weight into the clanging of armor. It sounds like the earth is being broken by the impact of this knight. I don't know why, but I just love those sounds. I love all the sounds of the knights clanking and creaking and so on, but especially when they're smashed by something or thrown to the ground.
Yeah. A lot of impact.
Yeah. Mine was just an old friend of ours, Dan, and I heard it within like the opening seconds of the
I
movie.
know what you're going to say, yes.
It's the red-tailed hawk. You have to have a red-tailed hawk. It doesn't matter where you are in the world.
Yeah. I mean, normally it's used to symbolize, the Wild West or like the wilderness in America, but it's used like 3 or 4 times in this movie.
Yeah.
I think I know the effect you mean, actually. I think I know the
screeching
bird screech.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a familiar, yeah.
It's usually in a cartoon you would cut to a desert and hear that noise.
I was going to say, I feel like it's used a lot in He-Man.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm imagining that.
Probably, yes.
I think you're right.
Most funniest moment.
The scene I remember most is in the workshop where Dennis destroys everything by trying to be helpful. Ever since I was a child, when I think of Jabberwocky, I pictured Dennis moving that tray of rivets and instigating the destruction of half the kingdom, basically, it seems.
Yeah. And shot in like a day or something.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's Harry H. Corbett's intro as well. That's his first scene, I think.
Right.
And I love that scene.
Yeah.
It escalates to the extreme that I didn't even think it would go. Like huge, big cog wheels are falling over, and people are getting flung, horizontally across the room somehow. Yeah. And then right at the end, one of the characters just pushes a pillar over because he's just like, well, might as well.
Yeah.
Funniest scene for me, aside from being one of my favourite shots, the source of one of my favourite shots, it is the jousting.
Yeah.
And I think it's just the cartoon mayhem of it and the senselessness of it all. But I do enjoy that scene a great deal. It's the one that I found myself laughing the most, and also the satire of the monarchy being slowly drenched in blood as a result of their carelessness.
Yes.
And also, what the scene going on, there's the violence and so on of the joust, but they're just kind of chatting amongst themselves, John Lemez and Max Wall, and their dialogue is brilliant in that scene as well. It's all very, very funny stuff.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's our Moobly Award.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Chris McKay. I'm the director of Renfield, and you're listening to Movie Oubliette.
Okay, it's time for our final verdicts. Should Jabberwocky from 1977 be released from the oubliette to terrorize the land and be worshipped by its silliness, or should it be urinated on, strapped to a trebuchet, and flung back into the oubliette, lost forever? Rob, Jabberwocky, should modern audiences see this movie?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is both of those things should happen to it, because people should obviously see it. But I mean, if any movie should be urinated on, it's this one, because it would love it. It wants to be urinated on. It wants to be hurled about. It wants to be treated badly. But I mean, obviously, I'm going to say people should see it, and people should see it with an open mind. Don't see it expecting Monty Python, because I'm still kind of staggered at how poorly received and poorly considered this film is, because I genuinely think it's a masterpiece. Cinema doesn't get much better than this for me. and it deserves all the attention and it deserves a reappraisal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether I would recommend this to everyone. Like, I felt like there were lots of jokes I didn't get. There were lots of references and actors that I had no idea who they were. I do get that it's important in terms of the trajectory of Terry Gilliam and the Monty Python as just like a cultural icon of a time. Like, there is a lot of humor in this movie that you just don't see anymore. And it is very much of that sort of era and that type of humor. And yeah, maybe modern audiences wouldn't get it, but it is important, I think, in terms of Terry Gilliam and that sort of path of cinema as well in Britain, I guess.
Yeah.
So you would set it free?
I would.
Okay.
You can't say otherwise now with me looking at you.
Well, no, I have to say I am in two minds about it, though, because I didn't go into it thinking it's going to be Monty Python, and I didn't go into it thinking it's going to be fully fledged Terry Gilliam, and I think you have to do that because it's neither.
Yeah.
It really is a transitional film. But for all that, I did find the first viewing, I did think, well, the middle is a bit saggy. I sort of love the ending, I love the beginning, and I love bits of the middle, but I'm sort of a bit confused. It was only when I watched it a second time that I thought, oh, actually, this is just a good time for 100 minutes.
Yeah. I think it's the expectation.
And beautifully crafted.
It's the expectation. You go into it thinking, oh, it's going to be a dragon film, I guess. And it's not really. It's just a lot of dialogue and ridiculous absurdity.
Yeah, it is.
I think that's a valid point about the middle. I think it could be 5 minutes shorter.
Yes.
Probably. I think that lost from the middle, that would probably work out.
I think so. But I think on the whole, I can't possibly see myself throwing it back into the oubliette and not recommending it just because it is such a beautifully made film with such a treasure trove of wonderful performances and moments in it. It would just seem a shame to throw it in there or even claim that it's a bad movie. And it's not a so bad it's good movie or anything along those lines. It's just odd. It's an odd little film.
Yeah.
And quite unique. And it's not who Terry became. It's not who Monty Python were. It's just this odd little movie.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be a shame if people overlooked it. So, yeah, just go into it with the right mindset, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the right mood as well. It's not something to be taken too seriously. It's something I think works with a drink or with a friend.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd agree.
Well, I think we're all on the same page, but let's check in with our patrons. Hello, Hal.
Yes, Conrad?
Can I have the patrons' vote, please?
I didn't see this coming. They want to chuck it back in.
I don't believe it.
Well, they were all Americans. That's it?
I don't know. Eddie Coulter said, I say let the Jabberwocky run wild. I've been a fan of this movie since I first saw it on VHS. You can see the themes that Gilliam will build upon in his later films. Plus, how can you not love the design of that monster?
Well said.
Yeah.
Yes. Whereas Chazilla said, I'm on the fence with this one. This isn't official Monty Python, but it's some of the troupe and definitely that kind of humour. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. I think the title Jabberwocky is very misleading. You don't actually see the Jabberwocky until 10 minutes from the end.
That's a fair point.
I think a better name for it would be Dennis's Continuing Adventures in the Land of Filth. I think that could be a subtitle, couldn't it? You know, one of those colon movies. And finally, our patron Jasmine said, I went into this expecting a lot of fun adventure and good belly laughs. Instead, I was confronted with meandering, redundant scenes of Michael Palin wandering the city, a quest that does not truly kick in until 82 minutes into the film, and quote-unquote humour involving body parts, blood splatter, and our hero being figuratively and literally urinated on over and over again. I didn't even crack a smile until the 103-minute mark, and that was when the end credits mercifully rolled.
Right.
So, yeah, a broad spectrum of views.
Yeah.
I think overall, we're setting it free.
Yes. Yeah. It's going free.
Okay, off you go, Jabberwock. So, Rob, it's been absolutely delightful to have you on the show. Where can our listeners follow you and find out more about what you have coming up next?
Well, YouTube is my main home. My channel's called The Bad Movie Bible. Check me out there. I don't do an awful lot of social media, if I'm honest, but I am on Twitter. I still call it Twitter as a point of principle. I am on Twitter, and I'm reasonably active there still, but YouTube's the place to go, really.
It's brave of you to be active on Twitter. It's very much like a Terry Gilliam quarry now, with just a few burning bits and horrible people.
So yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah. Is there a video coming up on the editing table at the moment, maybe?
Yeah, I'm working at the moment. I had a big project at the end of last year, was on ninja movies, the sort of the broad history of the 1980s ninja movie craze. And I'm working at the moment on an episode of Borrowing Blockbusters, which is my main series, looking at the best and worst, but mainly the best worst, rip-offs of famous or popular genre movies, and I'm doing an Indiana Jones episode at the moment, which should be up next month.
Marvellous. Oh, I will look forward to that. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
So, listeners, if you do want to follow us, we are on all social media platforms as Movie Oubliette, including TikTok. But you can also email us the old-fashioned way at movie.oubliette@gmail.com.
I almost wish that people could write to us on, the old paper way.
Yeah, right. Like snail mail.
Yeah, and we had a P.O. box number. That'd be great.
And we actually have real mailbag that we have to physically open.
Yeah. You could hear the sort of paper crinkling noises on the show. I think that'd be lovely.
Yeah. I mean, yes.
ASMR.
Yeah, all right. Maybe we'll organize a P.O. box sometime.
Yeah. Meanwhile, if you'd like to support the show, maybe to pay for our P.O. box, then head on over to Patreon, where for as little as $1, you can nominate and vote on films that we'll be featuring in future episodes. For $5, you can vote on the final verdict and get access to our exclusive monthly minisodes. And for $10, you can be an executive producer with exclusive behind-the-scenes knowledge, like Chazilla, Eddie Coulter, Isaac Sutton, Dr. Doggy, Serge, and Iconographer.
Yes. We have merchandise on Redbubble and a YouTube channel as well. You can peruse through. And if you haven't given us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you're listening to us, please give us a 5-star review and all your nice comments.
Yes, loads of them.
Yeah. Okay, next episode. Conrad, what are we doing?
Well, we're going to be celebrating the release of Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2, starring Timothée Chalamet.
Yes.
By doing something that you've been wanting to do for a very long time, which is the 1984 American epic space opera, Dune.
Yes. I read the book.
Yes.
This is one of those rare occasions I've actually read the book and I've read the sequel. Is this the first time we're doing David Lynch on the podcast?
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is. Yeah. David Lynch's only major flop, I think, really.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he never did the whole blockbuster thing anyway, so this is quite unusual.
No, I think famously George Lucas was trying to get him to direct Return of the Jedi.
Really? I did not know that.
Yes, but he showed up at Industrial Light and Magic with a massive headache, and nothing that transpired during the rest of his visit made it any better. So that was the end of that.
Wow, okay.
So can you imagine David Lynch's Return of the Jedi?
I would love to see that.
Yeah, I would actually. But yes, no, instead we've got his take on Dune, featuring Carl McLachlan, Patrick Stewart, Brad Dourif, Dean Stockwell, Virginia Madsen, Jose Ferrer, Sting, Linda Hunt, and Max von Sydow.
It's quite the cast, yeah.
Pretty an amazing lineup, but a massive flop. So, yeah, about time for a retrospective, I think.
Yeah. And I have the source material in my brain that I can compare. Maybe it will be better than Dreamcatcher. Maybe.
Who knows? Who knows? The dog didn't eat this one, so you...
No, I have the book intact.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that next time.
Yes. All right, listeners. Until then.
Bye.
Goodbye.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette.
You whimpering, snotty-nosed, cretinous oaf.